Jackson,
Good morning.
That's the biggest I can get it and still fit on the screen.
Yeah, you got
Is that going to be okay?
morning.
You have one in front of you.
Yeah, no, okay.
Okay.
I don't ask these people. I don't think it's.
They're just going to hear the big story.
Good morning.
For those of you whose eyesight is not good enough, we're sorry.
You can walk up there and sit closer if you'd like.
Good morning. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Board of Directors,
You can have mine too.
CROA Board of Directors Workshop. Have a move. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Thank you, Jack.
Second.
Second from Kevin. Our agenda today is one item. We have allocated an hour today for this. Hopefully we can accomplish this in that hour to review and discuss the 2019 CROA and CJC operating budget. We've addressed this with a full day session a week or two ago. It's all blurring now. And then we had some prior discussions before that, and I know we'll have some public notification of the details on the budget, and then we'll be voting on it officially at the October board meeting. Am I correct, Steve?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah. But today we have some final loose ends, we think, that we want to address, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian to get us started.
Sure. I'll talk off the big pictures. We handed out about 3 copies out there, and I understand Rachel's making a couple more. How I see today working is basically, we made real good progress last time. I'll walk you through the big picture. I'll be happy to take questions, but the big picture is pretty consistent with last time. The budget balances. Happy to take questions. Kevin had some auxiliary questions, which he needs to repeat for the audience. We'll discuss those. Any other board member has questions, we take those. I want to talk about 2 items. I want to talk about audit fees, what's come up there, trip to Arizona, what's come up there, because I think it fits into the budget. And those are the items that I think we need to hammer out today, and I think we're dangerously close to being done. This is a budget based upon the magazine and not the newspaper. That has not been officially voted. I think it's on the agenda for this Wednesday. Yep. So assuming that gets approved there, that makes this a budget that would happen. So let me walk you through the big picture. And I'm going to be quick here. So basically we had the 910 budget that we spent an entire day on. The 920 budget, what I've done here is I've shown the changes. Essentially when you look at it, and I'm doing budget 2018 versus revised budget 2019. What I do want to do for the October meeting is I want to, instead of showing budget 18, I want to say projected 18. I think that's something Susan and I should be able to do pretty easily. So that'll just be a change. But we've got the 80,000 increase, which is 2%. Remember we said we were going to go to a 2% increase, kind of as a standard for inflation. So we've done that. And then you got small items, which are just true-ups, and I'm not dealing with true-ups around this here. Farmers market income has got a reduction of 32,000 on income, and when we go to expenses, you'll see a reduction of 32,000. In the past, we had gross revenues, gross expenses, and a net. The new manager is just doing net revenues paying us, so it's the same numbers, except it's not a gross up and a gross up, just here's the net number. So that's the driver of that change. So you come down here, and that's your gross revenues, and then you go to your contra revenues. The big difference here is the $190,000 in capital improvements funding. It was at 310, it's now at 119,600, and contingency has dropped from 40,000 to 0. The reason is we said we were going to go to a contingency fund balance of $500,000 and just lock it there. So that's why we're not adding to it. And the 190,600 really becomes the balancing plug. And as you may remember, we had like $74,000 for the athletic fields. We had an additional $32,000 for dumpsters and items like that, which we'll reiterate again in the public meeting, but that makes up the bulk of that number there. So with those changes, which just perfectly flow, we stay in balance. If you bounce down to expenses, the farmers market 32 I talked about there. Net programs events is up $35,000. When we had the meeting last time and then Kevin went to a follow-up meeting, we said we did not want residents eating expenses and stuff like that. We wanted to take the time to get it right once. We did say we wanted to get it right this time, and then don't come back next year for an increase. So this is the let's get it right number. Legal and professional is down $55,000. Basically, we moved two things, which was the charter revision and one other thing.
The facilities master plan.
Facilities master plan into the reserve fundings, which is where we think they should be. So you bounce down here, the next page, Steve, and we're in balance.
Can I correct real quick? It was the sustainability study in the master plan. We left the charter revision in the
Right.
budget.
Okay. So we're in balance there with those changes. Go down to CJC. And again, I'm moving fast because we spent an entire day and everything on this, so I will take questions. You got Alec. Too fast.
Sorry. I just switched to the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Is it all the way up?
This is CJC.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Gotcha.
Okay, we got the small true up there in the 75-25 split. With the magazine, 285 of revenue goes away. Also, expenses go away by 297, 156. So that basically, that is the changes. You go down to the bottom of CJC, and you saw where more expenses was going away than revenues was going away. That's why our allocation goes down, because we're no longer having to spend as much. So CJC is in balance. It's driven by the newspaper income. It's really that simple. Why don't we go to reserves overview? Okay, reserves overview. What we did here, this is the same concept we had before. What we did do, we being Susan and Steve and myself, is actually tie this out in August and then roll it forward some more. So we got the August numbers to where we're comfortable with them. Budget inflows, which actually tie to supporting sheets that we built. So you come down here, replacement reserves, we think it's going to end the year at $1,169,000. The capital improvements at the $1,209,000. The big picture item is the $1,670,000, which we had at the last meeting. Let's go back to the sheet there. Contingency at 501 here is slightly over, but we'll lock it at the 500 if we approve it in October at that approach, and then surplus is $1,003,000. So there's no real change to this exhibit other than we went through and just tied out numbers, which I'll talk about more when I talk about audit stuff here in a minute. But
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
If we receive the reimbursement from the county, will that go, which fund would that actually be moved
It'll
into?
be, I'll show you here in a minute.
Okay, great.
It'll go into the capital improvement fund, and I'll
Okay.
show you here when we get to that page again.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any questions on this? Next page. Okay.
Oh, hold on, one second. Just make it a little bit bigger.
Oh, now he makes it bigger.
Catch on. I'm almost
All right,
catch on.
so here it's the same roll forward sheet I had at September 10th. Again, we're overfunded. We think we'll end this year at about 786. Just rolling it forward, we'd be about 800,000 over next year. We keep the overfunding there. Again, we're going to do the engineering study next year. If we find out we need a little more with athletic fields, we've got the ability to comfortably absorb a little need to add to it rolling forward. So on the replacement reserve, we're strongly reserved. Totally consistent with what we said last time. Next page. Okay. Yeah, blow this one up a little.
Gotcha.
Ooh.
That good?
Okay. Now, what we did here is we said with the 2% increase that we'd have the 949 and everything jumping in right off the bat. So we had that change rolling forward, and we've done 2% a year every year thereafter. So that's consistent with our last meeting, total resales. Island Village, still jumping in there. Prior mortgage contribution, the 119,600, I hope ties into the number you saw on the page before. So just roll that one forward. Apartment fee revenues, we have taken out SOLA entirely. I think it's a legitimate request because we don't know if it's coming back on. So we got those revenues coming through for total revenues. What we talked about last time and what I have done here is, okay, potential expenses. And what I did here in 19, I put 125, then I put 250, 3 million, 1 million 5, and 250. These are artificial Brian Kinsel made up numbers. The thought process being here is that I'm hoping that at the October board meeting when we approve the budget, we approve hitting the road immediately with the master park and recreation plan update. Realistically, it gets done and rolled out with the new board, and we start looking at it in April. Coming out, we do prioritization, we start spending some money. Is 125 right? Could you spend 250 next year? I don't know, maybe. We get the athletic fields done this year. The 3 million and the 1.5 million, if I'm assuming that a community center is still going to be a priority, I picked 4 million 5, and I picked 250 other years. A very intelligent person in this room could change these numbers easily. What's really important here is, okay, we've got the revenue base rolling forward. We've got some potential expenses out here. You can see we're comfortably 2.5, 3, 1.6 million, 1.5 million, 2.5 million. I'm going to get to your question in a minute, Jackson, on the next page here. Because this assumes that we get the 50% reimbursement from the county, which would affect that. If we didn't get it, this would be a couple million lower, and maybe it talks about timing a little. If we get the money from the county, we can do all this work. We can talk about pickleball courts, we can talk about parks and artisan park, we can talk about running tracks, we can do different things within a prioritization scheme and still comfortably keep an amount of money out there that allows us to consider future initiatives into the future. So I think there's a strong revenues scheme in place. Like I said, whether we spend 125 one year or spend 300 or 250 versus 350 really doesn't matter. You see the big picture here. It does include a community center in the future, which I've just shown being funded over 2 years like we're doing with the athletic fields because it would take a while to build. But conceptually, it's there.
On the apartment fee revenues, they go up pretty substantially over a period of time. Is this anticipating new housing stock, whether it's in Island Village or somewhere on the boulevard replacing SOLA?
It is. It's anticipating both. I think Island Village has already said there's going to be a 300-unit apartment complex, and then I think there's another one being planned along Celebration Boulevard, right across the street from Waterside.
2020 is predominantly Island Village, though.
So even without SOLA coming back online?
SOLA's zero in here, totally zero.
And if they come back, then there's an increase.
Then there's more. Yeah.
And can I add also, I think it's important for us to understand that as we talk about this slide here, these numbers, it's different from maintenance and operation budget. Even though these numbers, when you look at the annual, they come in as contra revenue, they wash. So they do not affect at all your assessment dollar that the homeowner is being charged annually for maintenance and operations. So any tweaking that we do in this is going to affect your parks master plan ultimately, but it doesn't affect your maintenance and operation budget one bit. So you almost have to compartmentalize them into two different boxes when we're talking about our budget for the year.
So am I correct then in assuming, Steve, that this document would be the guiding document for us as we begin to discuss things like a community center or pickleball or parks and artisan or shade for the dog park or whatever those projects might be? This is the document we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, when you work with a planner for a parks master plan, one of the pieces of the scope for that project is what's the source of funding for your future projects? When do you think you're going to get the money for these projects? And then they'll utilize that based on the prioritization of the needs of the community to determine when you can do what.
So
and what the
that
costs are.
planner would use this document?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a key document for them. And the good thing is you save some money because they don't have to build it. We already have it.
Brian, what I'm looking at under total, so potential expenses.
Yep.
Okay, those seem to be, they're building expenses or capital expenses. We have not accounted for operating expenses as a result of these capital improvements.
We have, can you take me all the way up to the top page?
You want to go back here?
To all the way to the top, right here. So the reason this 310 drops to 120 is in this 190,000, we're absorbing about 80,000 of operating expenses on the new athletic fields now. And it includes 32,000 of the additional dumpsters with the changes there, fees and stuff like that. So they're getting absorbed in this $190,000 a year, which has a couple of one-type items that may not ever come back again, but I thought they would be operating expenses. So we rolled, so that 310,200 that was always rolled forward in the past is now 119,600 rolling forward, because that's where I think the operating expenses are kind of coming through.
Well, I think in the future, I would like
It
to
could be
see
more.
the capital improvements is be considered, the operating expenses be considered out of the capital improvement fund, the things we've added.
Yeah,
But
we're talking
essentially
about-
you are, right?
Essentially, that's what we have done, by taking, because capital improvement funding was going to, capital improvement funding was going into the working capital fund.
Yeah.
That's where it's going. So as we reduce that, we're essentially taking those funds out of the reserves and putting them into operating is what we're doing, basically to cover expenses there. So I think we're doing what you're saying.
I guess I'm just trying to clarify that that makes sense in year one when you've got the new item coming online and you've got expenses associated with it. As that asset moves to year two, help me out here.
In year one, we had about, I'm going from memory here, I think we had 75 or 77,000 of expenses relating to the athletic fields, but Steve only included about 8,000 or 9,000 revenues. As we talked about it, we thought the 8,000 to 9,000 of revenues was light. The expenses were only for 9 months of the year, so we said revenue goes up, expense goes off, they probably offset. We're guessing here, we'll be wiser in year two. So with the real new addition being the athletic field, I think the athletic field is fairly represented in what we've done out here in the working capital buildup. This is why I personally believe in the rolling budget type approach, and even if we don't approve that approach, I'll probably build it anyway, because I think it would be good just to have 4 to 5 years of this is what we're thinking, here's the different apartments, et cetera, how they're rolling into it. And we can always tweak assumptions when we went wrong or life changes, but I just think it would be wisdom. So I think it's got it in there. It has definitely been thought about, and we've talked about it more than once.
And what's the accounting reason for calling this working capital when it's really operating expense in year one?
The working capital is really the working capital reserve. The expense is up here in the different expense categories.
Right.
If you'll remember when we went through the detail on his sheet and we had the athletic fields in different places, those were all in operating expenses.
Okay.
So down here, we either do replacement reserves or we create this working capital improvement fund which can fund the athletic fields, parks, whatever we choose to use it for. That's why we have it down here in working capital versus the operational up here. And the additional expenses have went in the operational. We've reduced down here to help cover the operational expenses from those things as we go forward.
So essentially, if you do it the way Jack said, you would just take the money from that second pool, that capital improvement, and move it back into operating to balance your budget. But you're just reducing the contribution going into there so that you don't have to take it and move it back. You're just taking it up front instead of taking it in the back end.
Okay.
So you mentioned the dumpsters, right? This is just something that I was thinking of. Where are those located?
Where the dumpsters are physically located, or dollars in here?
30 to where they're physically located.
The dumpsters are located in the parks.
Okay.
For example,
That's what you're
Heritage
talking
Hall, there where we built the thing and stuff
So
like that.
are those funded 100% by CROA, or are they through a Parks and Rec fee? And the
Um,
reason why I ask, the trash generated from somebody that goes to those pools, or the overall maintenance of that, not maintenance, but the operation, right? Should that be a Parks and Rec fee? Should that be an apartment fee?
It is.
It
So
is,
if
okay.
you look at the line that's in the square right now, this one right here.
Yeah,
maintenance facilities.
You
So,
are so funny, Steve.
If you I'm struggling with this, come on.
so the $32,000 is in that line. It's, if you look to the left here, or maybe you're right, it's the recreation facility management category here. Every GL line that falls underneath the recreation facility management category is part of the apartment recreation fee. So wherever it says recreation facility management, it's how you determine the apartment recreation fee. Now, I'll make sure that you're there, so I
Yeah,
can go on to the
I don't know if
next
I
thing.
am. Hold on.
So, I'll show you over here. So this GL line, maintenance facilities, has $32,000 in there.
Do we
If you were
have
to
that?
look at the,
I don't know.
Here,
Hold on.
Seriously,
I don't think I have
you
that.
have it.
we have the CROA budget in front of you. You guys still looking at the CJC?
No, it's down here.
You can't see it on the, right here, so we're talking maintenance is right here. It's on the 40. It's what's in there.
That's his box. So you're saying everything underneath that?
Yeah, so, let me take you back out big picture. When we looked at them on September 10th, each one of these GL lines had a detail sheet with it that had detail line 1, detail line 2, detail line 3, detail line 4, and it talks about the expenses that went into that. This GL line right here has $32,000 in it for the payment for the dumpsters.
Okay.
So this falls underneath the recreation facility management category. Every one of these recreation facility management categories are taken into consideration when you come up with your formula for your partner rec fees. So as we get there, we're determining what that pool of expenses are minus the income for your formula to get your recreation fee. So the recreation fee, you all as a board are choosing to take that money and put it into that capital improvement pool of dollars, those funds. Now you're saying we want to use some money to offset the expenses from our new facilities. So your methodology now is not to go and dip into the pool. You're just reducing your total amount of dollars that you're contributing to the pool from what used to be the payment to this building, the mortgage to this building. So you're balancing your budget with that pool of money instead of moving the entire thing over and then going, okay, let's take out this much money and move it back over here. You're just doing it up front instead of that extra step in the process.
So the Parks and Rec fee, that pool, right, the 300,000, whatever it was for the mortgage here, they used to pay into that?
That mortgage, yes, is part of that formula for the
Okay.
Parks and
And
Recreation.
that amount of contribution is now went down.
Yeah, but
That amount of contribution to reserves, they're still paying in that much money.
They're still paying
We're
in
just
that
putting
money.
it
We're moving it in a different
Some of it's going
area.
into operating and some of it's going into
Okay.
reserves. So
Okay.
that's the only,
That helps
the
me.
310,200 is still being paid, it's just where it's allocated.
going.
right,
Okay,
you're just
that helps.
choosing how you want to spend the dollars.
Thank you.
But I think the purpose of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish is apartment users still use the parks. They use the dumpsters that are in the parks, therefore they should have to pay a piece of it. And to show that that is happening, it says recreation facilities management, it falls underneath that category, so it is part of that formula.
And how far down does that go? Where it goes all the way to the bottom, everything underneath that is part of that Parks and
Yeah,
Rec?
every GL line that you see here that
Everyone that
says
has that
recreation
label on
facility
the left.
management has it on there.
Recreation
All the
facility
recreation.
management,
There's
got it,
about,
okay.
there's about 15 of them.
Yep, so you could go through and highlight them all,
Got
and
it.
those are all part of that formula.
So Steve, if you have to roughly guess, how much of the revenue fee is going towards the expenses rather than new projects, just roughly?
How much of the revenue fee?
You mean, you're talking about the 310,200?
Of the total
Of the total-
apartment fee and,
I think the better way to look at it is we've got total revenues of $6 million. We're putting $1.4 million into reserves, so let's say 22% of our revenues is going into either working capital or replacement reserves versus day-to-day operational type items.
Yeah, and your apartment recreation fees, your total is $337,630.
I think what you have to remember is we collect all revenues.
Right,
And then
right,
at the
right.
end of the day, we either allocate those revenues to replacement reserves, working capital reserves, or day-to-day operating expenses, and that's,
we're just talking
So-
about bumping up the operating expenses because we're getting over in this.
we're clearly bumping up
We're bumping
operating
up.
expenses because we're having more administrative expenses from the implementation of the athletic fields, the change in the sanitation where we had a credit for a
Yeah.
couple of years
Yeah.
that unwound contractually and stuff like that.
I guess the question is, are we bumping it up enough? Do we want to put like an escalation on that?
I can't hear.
So an escalation on,
For
Bumping
the
it up
operations,
enough.
the amount that's going into the operations.
well, we backed into it after it was determined that you were gonna do a 2%. So I took and just plugged, and usually I would do all the expenses, all the revenue first, and then determine what the assessment is based on that.
Right.
I just plugged the assessment in off the bat and said, this is what you're getting in that very first line, association dues revenue, that's what you're getting. So
Right.
how do you balance the budget
Right.
from there? And that's where we took it from the contribution, the building contribution.
How I think about it is, literally, we've got $1,350,000 here, of which 606. So, but if you looked at the 622 and the 119 example, you'd get 740 roughly. We got a $740,000 soft item that is just growing. If we hit a point where we said we need
$22,000 because some sewer system went, and we just need the money, or pick your whatever item. We could just, we've got it in the reserves, those are flexible monies, we can do it. We've got a nice buffer, so.
Yeah, under that scenario, these dollars are locked. These are for the reserve study. And then anything that we have above and beyond what you need in this amount of money is surplus. You could technically say, we don't need that much, we're going to transfer that surplus over to here.
Yeah.
But these three pools of money right here, surplus, contingency, and capital, you can use them for however you want. You can use them to fix the whatever problem you're having. You can use them to build a new park. You can use them for hurricane dollars. These three aren't protected for, that they have to be this way. If you decided you wanted to lower the assessments, you could take them out of there. I mean, you can use these dollars for how you want to.
And you can also make decisions in the future. You may find in the future that you've built out most of the facilities you have land for and stuff like that, and say, I don't need as heavy of a CROA assessment because I don't have, you know.
But remember, everything's tied though. If you lower your assessment, now all of a sudden these dollars start going down because those dollars are driven by resale of homes, which are assessment.
After, I have a couple things that I just want to touch on, and most of that's going to be in that email. But based on the Parks and Rec fee, really quick, real estate property taxes, that's for the pools, clubhouses, things like that? And that's listed as
This
an
building-
other item?
This building in particular is the big number.
That's at 17.5? Okay. I don't know where that should go, but,
So
It's-
I
it's
guess the
accounted
question is,
for in
why-
those
why is that
recreation
not
fees.
part of the?
It is.
Parks and Rec.
It is part,
It's accounted
Even though
for.
it's listed as other.
even though it's listed as other, yes.
Yeah, so on the formula, I put all the taxes in there also.
Okay.
And then I put capital reserve, or, the replacement reserve dollars in there also.
Is that
Well,
formula some?
one second. Could you then just change the label on that to show other slash,
Recreation.
Yeah.
so that it's clear
There's no
to the
question.
community what's going into that formula? Anything that you've added to the formula, I think ought to be identified as such, so that people could follow that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that would help. That would even help me and avoid a lot of questions. So tying back to SOLA, I know that, I don't know if we're gonna actually have an agreement on this at all, but I just wanna make it clear that I do not agree that they are not paying Parks and Rec fees. I believe that they should, I apologize, I believe that they should continue, because we planned the budget with them in it. And when they do come back online, they're going to expect whatever Parks and Rec administration to be at 100% right where they left it. And I don't know if that's entirely possible if they just go ahead and skip out on that payment. Now, what did happen, and I sent the board an email about this last week, is Heinz, the original developer, did go bankrupt. Huge company, and for them to do that, they wouldn't do it lightly. And it's directed at this project here. It even mentions it in that article. So that actually goes into another tangent that I won't touch too far on, but I would be in favor of looking into what CROA can do to push Kanoa and the county into looking at getting that condemned building, which from what I understand, the ordinance is after 12 months, it can be knocked down by the county, and then a lien is placed on that parcel for the next builder, or whatever the case is, to go ahead and have to pay that off before that happens. I understand there's a litigation and everything else going on, but our residents are suffering from that eyesore. And I think if Bennett from Manamee got on board with that, I think we would probably have a lot more success in getting rid of that eyesore. Yeah.
Go ahead.
The question of how we assess unoccupied or apartments that don't have COs is driven not by the charter, I'm sorry, not by statute, but by our charter. Am I correct in that assumption, Steve?
It's an amendment, I believe, to the charter, yeah. So I think the answer to that question is not necessarily a CROA board choice. It probably needs legal interpretation of that document to answer Kevin's question. Can you still charge? I'm not sure.
I would like us to put that question to council, and I would also ask that we put it on Susan's very lengthy list of charter changes to be considered.
Because I understood it as a CO once received, but it really doesn't say anything about losing a CO, I guess because it's assumed that it won't happen.
Well, they don't have one, so that would be the question. If they had it and then they lost it, can they still be held
I was
accountable?
I was
for
under
that?
the impression
Like I
that once
said,
they received the CO.
I understand the question.
But-
There's a lot of complicated answers
Yeah.
in there that
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not sure.
But I think we're setting a precedent for when
Well, and if they're in bankruptcy.
other issues come down
If
the
they're in
road.
bankruptcy, we can't collect it, so.
The original builder is.
Right.
but not the current owner.
Right.
To me, there's two issues here. One is, as we build the budget, I think a principle, and I had suggested taking solar off here. The principle is budget conservatively. Don't assume that the money's coming in. Bankruptcy ties into that, unoccupied units. So that's just a budget planning piece. The separate question is, what are they obligated to do? And so that's where I
It's not
think we
going
need
to affect the budget today, so yes, it's not
Doesn't affect-
entirely appropriate for right now, but I want it in the back of our minds.
Yeah.
But if you give me
As we look
authorization
for
to
21.
contact
Yes.
legal, which it sounds like you
Let's go
have.
forward
Yeah,
and
go-
ask legal.
Yep.
Go forward and ask legal, what are they obligated to do under, the CO and,
Right.
Who made the final decision to stop, for Solar to stop paying? Did they come to us and say, hey, we don't have a CO, we don't want to pay you anymore? Like, how?
are they still billed?
How
Or
did that-
what's the status?
Yeah,
Conversation
I'll
happened.
have to do a little bit more research on that and find out what it is. But let me go legal first
Okay.
and find out what legal's response is. And if legal's response is absolutely they still have to pay, then it's just a
Awesome, it's
matter
fine.
of following what the charter says we can do to enforce not getting the apartment recreation fees.
But
Because
I-
you can't foreclose on them. It's not a CROA property.
No.
It's a
I
Canoa
understand.
property.
What I'd like to avoid though is I'd like to avoid a situation where we're getting a solution to something where we haven't defined the problem. I think it'd be
So
good
that's-
to have a 1 or 1.5 page paper that says, here are the facts. Came online here,
Yep.
who was the ownership?
Right.
Why did it
Went
leave? Yeah.
offline here.
What are they obligated
Here were
to
the
do?
changes. So let's just have a 1-pager
Cool.
facts, just, here are the facts, and then legal can do its thing, but then we're talking, turkey.
And I think there's a procedural piece to this, which is going forward, this may not be the only apartment complex that goes into lack of CO. We ought to have a process that we know this is what happens, and this is how we do it, and this is how we make that assessment and decision. So it seems like it's a reasonable thing to consider in the charter.
Yes.
Are they providing any security at the building or any,
The latest update that we had was that they're trying to sell it to a new owner that's going to be able to continue on with the construction defect lawsuit that they have. I don't have any new information of how, it was supposed to be by the end of September, so I'll have to follow up to find out where they are with that.
So can we finish up the
Yeah.
big picture, please?
Okay, so
Then we'll
going
go
back
back
to
to your
Steve's point though, and the point that Jackson and Kevin were asking about, this end of year reserve here in the working capital fund, plus the $500,000 is loose money that we have the ability to access in the case of an emergency. So it's not like we need, going to Debbie's question, because I thought about this yesterday, I don't think we need to really have loose, we could budget $20,000 and say, well, here's $20,000 in case of emergency. We've really got $2-3 million in case of emergency. And even roll back. So we have soft pockets to cover little things that come up. So I think we're in good shape there. Can you pass me to the last one? Which goes to this one, and again, your question, and I'll wait on 1 second. Jackson, okay, so here, we reimbursed, we have budgeted 2.245 of reimbursement from the county. That may be $1,750,000, that may be $2 million, it may be 2.25 million, I don't know. Those numbers on that previous page, if we don't get to $2 million, are too high by $2 million. That's just reality. I did not hear what happened at the county commissioners meeting the other night. Did anybody hear?
They told me they would inform me if it didn't pass, so I'm
Okay, so
assuming that everything was fine.
Everything appears to be moving forward for purposes of the audience, and the actual amount we get reimbursed, we don't know. So,
And can I just, one more time, that when my conversation with Beth that night, the deputy county manager, was everything was on track, they're making progress, they're just a little bit behind on getting the interlocal agreement updated, but they're trying to work that on one path to get it to us so that our attorneys can review and the board can review, and then the other path is working with their legal department to get the ordinance verbiage changed. So the significant dates for this are October 1st, the ordinance wording goes in front of the commission, and if that's approved, then it's posted for a month, and then in November, the vote to finalize it. And then that's when we'll know for sure if it's done, as long as the interlocal agreement is signed on top of that. Those are the two things you need to have happen to get those dollars.
And those dollars have to be earmarked for this purpose. So when the check, I'm assuming, you know, we have a check signing and a check arrives, that check has to be deposited into which?
Working capital fund.
Working capital.
On this,
And that's where the reimbursement should go to.
this one, this category right here.
Capital group. So can you take me back to CROA?
Yep. CROA
First
budget.
sheet. Okay, so to summarize, I, Steve, Susan, have spent a lot of money, a lot of time on this budget. I believe it's a very good, solid budget that allows us to go forward with the town's business. The only thing that not in here that I think we ought to discuss, and since Joe Cook's here, I think it's a wonderful time to discuss it, is the audit fee, which could be higher for 18 and 19. You know, that's about 7,500 or so. Maybe we should just talk about briefly. But absent more questions from anybody, Kevin's questions or anybody else's questions, I believe we have a budget that works fine. Gary, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Or just come on up, somebody got you on tape.
I'll wait until you're finished. Gary Hudspeth, 1471 Resolute. For the record, what is your official definition of a true-up?
In other words, when we went through with the change from the newspaper to the magazine and other minor items, true up basically is where they did a final look at what's going into a category and said, we're gonna change this one by $400 or this one by $300 and that type of stuff. So officially, that's what it is. Is that a fair statement?
Just minor tweaks here and there to make sure that everything was where it needed to be.
So you, by extension, you might say a true-up is a continued research into a more definite figure. Not because of a change, but better analysis gave you a truer
Let me
figure.
answer that question first, and now I'd like to hear Steve's answer.
Okay.
I believe a true-up is when you change 13,000 to 13,200 because you've now got two months of better data. It is not when you change 13,000 to 14,000 because you had plus 900 and minus 890,000. I would hope the treasurer would hear about that. So is it the former?
I would agree with that, and then it's also based off of the direction that I was given from this board on the September 10th meeting of we want to look at a magazine versus a newspaper. We want to look at you know, removing the contingency dollar contribution. Those are all the changes that were made, and based on those changes, there's a couple dollars here and there that were done to get the balanced budget. You could see on CJC last year was $4 over, so we trued that up to make sure that we're not a $4 off on our budget, those types of things.
I still go with my analysis of a suggestion that it is through better analysis of the budget at a later date, you've come up with a more clear figure.
That's a fair statement. I mean, we considered September 10th marathon session an analysis of the budget, absolutely.
Yeah. The reason I bring it up is for posterity and for future boards, this document will probably be resurrected in the future. I would put your definition of a true-up down here in the notes, like you've done in other pages, just so people understand in the future what you were trying to get to.
Okay.
So in that light, look at line 3 on this page, recreation fee apartments. The true-up that you have for this one is in revised, a reduction of $66,000. And can you be more specific what that was about?
Solo.
Ah, so,
The true-up, no, let's be very careful here. The true-up was from 342 to 337,
Yeah.
5,000,002. We had the original reduction that we talked about on September 10th from the budget that was the 2008. So the true-up only talks about the change from September 10th to September 20th.
right, it's all within a month,
Yeah,
a couple of
it's
weeks.
within 10 days.
But the reason for that difference is removing SOLA.
The reason for the difference from 2018 was reducing, solo related.
But this $5,000 is from any of the true-ups in the recreation facility management categories, which all would affect that number.
Yeah, the changes here are the changes from the meeting that we had on September 10th.
Well, that 5,000 is pretty small compared to the 66,000. I'm looking at your 19 revised, which is A minus B, of 66,000 reduction. That's based on the difference between the 2018 budget
Right.
and your current budget.
Yeah,
And that difference is due to SOLA.
and, okay, so let me answer your question.
Yeah,
For
good
when we
comments.
do, for the public, we will have 2018 forecast is what I'd like to have versus our final 2019 budget. And then we would talk about something of that size, obviously, and what's driving the
Right.
change.
So what I'm getting at is rather than in your comment section, for that particular line, rather than say it's a true-up, it's really the removal of solar.
Fully, we're talking apples and oranges. When we do this versus this, I 100% agree, I wouldn't call 66,000 a true-up. When I'm doing September 10th versus September 20th, it was a true-up. So I agree, we'll make it work.
Well, now I understand, because you're right, between the 10th and the 20th of September, that is a true-up. But on this piece of paper, A minus B is not a true-up.
You're 100% correct.
It's a SOLA
And when I sent
difference.
this to the board a couple times, I had an email on top of it explained. And I didn't have any of that because I wasn't thinking about the
And
public,
now you
so-
know why I asked for a definition of a true-up. So in line 3, rather than true-up in the comment, if you want to preserve this A minus B, I would write reduction of SOLA and a small true-up.
For what we show for the
Add
public,
that to
absolutely agree.
comments. Yeah.
Okay, agreed.
Now, I want to make sure that your definition of true-up applies in all cases where you have true-up listed. If it doesn't, then please put in there the real reason there's a difference.
True-up applies to the difference between 910 and 920 only.
Oh,
That
true,
doesn't-
but you're showing it between A and B, which is 2018 and 2019.
Is
In
it
that one.
not that the comments were for that 1.5 week period? The comments are reflective only that week and a half, not of the whole package.
It is fair, and that's the reason why we never give these documents to the public, and you've convinced every one of us we won't do it again.
Well,
They're
there's,
gonna go out here once we get
They go out,
their
this
okay.
document wouldn't go
Once you're
out.
done working through all the weeks.
there is some transparency here, and all I'm asking is that you identify what the comments are. If your comments are truly the difference between 10 and 20 of September, then say so.
Fully appreciate it. It was
Okay.
built for a different
That's what it was.
purpose, and we shared it this morning because I had been talked to it by a couple of people who said as we talked about numbers, we just love to see the numbers.
And,
That's the reason.
and you see, the reason I'm asking is I
No,
didn't
fair.
understand what a true-up truly meant.
No, it's fair. Your comment's fair. I agree.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Yes.
On the Davies disputed bill, the 240,000 originally and then the revision, where does that fit in this budget? How have we?
That's a great question. It doesn't. Where we stand with Davies, is Susan was going to be working on it last Friday. Where did you stand as of last Friday?
Well, as of last Friday, I know what we owe as of today,
Which is how much?
which is, oh God, I knew you were gonna ask me. It's, I'll tell you.
About 151,000, isn't it?
Well, that's about the difference of what wasn't booked, $151,000.
We owe about 30.
We owe.
And, right, and 64 off of that.
So the problem is, so let's take that question and let's go to the audit.
Yeah.
To educate the audit, our audit fees are running about 10, 11,000 a year, and the auditors come back and said they won't do the 2018 without an audit fee of at least 17.5. So let's talk about education. When you are an auditor and you take a audit on like this one, you think, this is one I can do during the year when I have staff accountants who are not doing anything else. So I take it, I expect to get a few revenues, I expect to lose a little bit of money, but I expect this to be pretty easy. We have had a situation where on that $10,000 to $11,000 audit fee, they ate expenses last year of about $25,000, and they're eating expenses this year of about $25,000. So it is no longer revenue neutral. It is just a loss leader. We are responsible for the financials. The way you would bid this, the way it worked my entire public accounting, I was in the private sector, but in dealing with public accountants for years and years, the company, or in our case, CROA, is responsible for the financials. We give somebody the financials. We are supposed to tell them we think they're done. They audit what we prepare, and they go forward. We have been more in a situation, as I've learned more, I think, where we almost give them something, get their feedback, let them make changes, give us information, we go back and forth. We're sitting here, it is almost October, and we're still not even got all the darned invoices booked from last year. We can argue about the reason why, but in accounting speak, you get an invoice, you book it, you book a payable, you can defer the payable forever if you want to fight litigation. You can have wonderful footnotes. I've had one conversation with the auditor, but you know, we're sitting here and we still haven't booked it all. So you ask a question, how much expense is not booked? We haven't even solved that. The auditor has not issued an audit statement because the auditor would give us a qualified opinion because they haven't booked all the expenses that we know about. So the auditor is actually doing us a favor by not issuing an opinion yet, but the auditor's losing a lot of money. And so what should happen on that one is we should get the things booked, we should have the payable. The auditor is going to make the change in the 2017 financials, which will reduce the starting surplus. Whether we, you know, I don't think we've already finalized our financials. Whether we change the old ones and disclose it or change it in the new year, it's still going to be a hit to the financials of a certain amount, which we still can't tell you clearly. Second thing that happened, because the other thing that I've done is I've said Susan should go to Arizona. I think there's a control weakness. I use that word intentionally. And because like when we did the roll forward of reserves, you know, we're sitting here and it looked like a couple $100,000 was being paid out of working capital that should be paid out of replacement funds. So let me say, I think Arizona's probably got a very competent organization. I think it's probably got full of good, competent people. But again, we are responsible for our financials. Susan is doing many jobs. This is not a shot at Susan at all. But if Susan is our accounting person who's providing oversight, she needs to be in coordination with them. Because what I think is happening is they book something, we do financials, we get to year end, all of a sudden financials get put together, and then everybody says, oh, need to change this, need to reconcile this, need to do this. That is not the way it should work. At a minimum, I think Susan should go out there once a year in the fall. We should have an agenda for, say, an October or early November meeting where we go through, we make sure the cash accounts all roll forward properly, things are booked where they're there, so when we come and the financials are done, there are financials. And we're coming forward and producing something to the auditor in March. I mean, we don't care if they do it in the second quarter when it's cheap, but here are our financials. If we give them something, they look at them, say it doesn't make sense, and then changes go back and forth. That's why they lose all these hours. In a perfect world, I think Susan should go out there twice a year. I think Susan or whoever else Steve may want to allocate should go out there in the fourth quarter and second quarter. We know the financials properly reflect what is happening here for CROA. CROA is a big organization. We got $6 million in revenues. We got millions of dollars of funds. We need to make sure when we're talking about working capital funds or replacement reserves or anything else that we have comfort the numbers we're getting are not off. And we have found these, I've asked many questions and Susan's asked more questions, and we're like, we got to change this. This is what led to my email last week. This is my frustration. We can sit here and say the audit fee should be 10 or 11,000 and go to another auditor. They're going to have the same issue. It's a small community. If our current auditor just says, thank God we've eaten 25,000 in the last 2 years, our next auditor is going to charge more. At the end of the day, we are better off as an organization if we have a good, solid process. So everybody says, CROA's a celebration. Celebration's a wonderful town. CROA runs it well. It's an easy audit. Here's what it should cost. I think we've lost some of that. And with that as background, I'll throw it out for comments.
Well, can I just add one more thing to that? You did have an auditor that was doing CROA's audit for years, and last year the board decided to change to a new auditor, so a new set of eyes, learning the new ways of how CROA does things. It did cause some confusion, I think. And I think it's mostly just some lost in translation. The money's not missing per se, it's just that there's some understanding of how these three different funds work and those types of things.
I think there's no fraud. I think there's no incompetence. I'm not trying to cast any aspersions in any of that direction at all. I'm saying there's an oversight process here that I still think is needed.
I believe that Jackson had asked, how is it going to affect our 2019 budget? I have every intention of having a journal entry done by the end of this month. So it's going to hit in 2018. Whatever it is going to hit in 2018. Our auditor actually has issued the preliminary draft budget that Jen was going through last week. Oh, yes, the audit. And it's an unqualified opinion. So that should be definitely on the October agenda for approval.
Okay, and I hadn't seen any of that, okay.
It just came on.
Okay. fine,
Friday.
fine.
I think that one of the smartest things we could do right now would be to have Susan go out to Arizona, but I think, Brian, you should go with her. I think that there should be the opportunity for CCMC corporate to hear from a CROA board member with your competency and skills who says, here's what your systems do with respect to our ability to do our job and to carry out our fiduciary responsibilities. And while there is no question that they are competent and wonderful, I think there is also a very deep question about their responsiveness to the particular needs that we've got, and I think that would be enhanced by having a face-to-face discussion. So I would be in favor of paying for your travel and expenses to go out there and do that if you're willing to volunteer your time to do it. Maybe this is something that happens annually, maybe it's not, maybe it's a one-off where you have to be there and after that it's Susan. The other thing that concerns me a bit is we pay Susan's salary and we pay a fee to CCMC. I'm assuming that in our monthly fee to management, there is some built-in cost for the ancillary support services that come from your corporate offices. But I don't know how much of that goes there, and I don't know how much service we get. I know that there has been, from time to time, real frustration with various service areas, with Artisan Park, with others, in getting responsive information back from CCMC's corporate accounting folks. And I just want a greater degree of responsiveness there that says they understand who we are, what we're doing, and what we need, and how do we make this work. I'm tired of adjusting us to them and to their systems. We're the client, and I think to some extent there needs to be some adjustment of their functioning. For example, Brian had to recreate this entire accounting delivery, putting the numbers together, because CCMC's accounting structures, their reporting, was for their purposes, not for our purposes. I appreciate that, but I think it's unacceptable. I mean, I really think as the client, when we say we need it, they should give it to us.
Okay. So you asked 3 or 4 questions, and before I let you answer, I'll answer. Creating this is something I've done my entire life. And I've never, in all my corporate experience, seen a budget system that produces stuff like this. So I think that's an unfair expectation.
So you're saying you don't think they could do it even if we asked them to?
Well, no, because you end up, no, I don't, because at the end of the day, you end up personalizing it to you full time. I spent many hours doing this because I'm a neurotic accountant who just enjoy doing this, and I am retired and have time. You probably, because I can make changes on the fly and be quick to take all your comments. So that's an unrealistic expectation. As regards CCMC and their responsive to us, I think part of the criticism has to go to the CROA board. At the end of the day, we have to set expectation. Susan told me she's been out to Arizona once in 3 years. This board's been here 6, 7 months. At the end of the day, I think we, as a board, need to set an expectation of, and I'd love to hear Joe's comments in a couple of minutes here and Steve's, but I think we need to set an expectation of, look, for a homeowners association of our size, we need this type of responsiveness, meaning, and when I really worry about responsiveness, what I care about as a treasurer is, all right, I'm getting a set of financials that are accurate, and that, and Susan and I have spent some time on this, so I'm being a jerk here in some ways, but on the other hand, we need to know cash rolled forward right in these accounts, and we've, been trying to learn this and ask questions and play 2020. This can be done pretty easily by just putting a system in place. There are other things like the booking. Susan didn't even know the stuff wasn't booked last year. That's a communication issue. That is an advantage of having Susan go out there. I think having me go out once is perfectly fine. Then I should write a report and I should say, there's a lot of CPAs out here. There's this, that. We should take a lot of comfort. This is how we should manage the process. Or I should say, holy cow, I'm scared to death. I mean, I'm assuming that I'm going to find out it's pretty impressive, to be honest with you, since they are. But that would be a good report for me. You probably need a board member going once. If if you can send a board member who's a CPA and all that kind of stuff, great, that probably helps. Then at the end of the day, we ought to come back as a board and say, all right, Joe, Steve, Susan, this is an expectation we have for the coordination and the oversight. Because at the end of the day, I don't know how Steve uses Susan for everything, but Susan ought to have so much of her time that is set to making sure that we're getting a good set of financials. Now I've said a lot, and I'll let you three talk.
I'll jump in real quick first. So I really like Brian's statement that he made earlier of you have to define solutions to the problem. So we have to first define the problem. I don't think the problem is a lack of responsiveness from corporate offices or that they're not willing to do something that we've asked them to do. I think the problem here is the uniqueness of celebration of what we're trying to accomplish here on this board. I don't think every community at a large scale size like this has a capital improvement fund, a surplus fund, and a contingency fund. So while it's not rocket science per se, I think it's just a matter of getting the translation in place, and I think that your solution that you've just presented of having Susan go out there, having Brian go out there, that solves the problem. I think that helps get us to where we want to be. The process that you guys have gone through with your budget this year, the process that we've presented to you for strategically thinking big picture for the next 5 years, I think gets this community a lot further along than we've been in the past. And that's what we're ultimately trying to do, right? Get better every day and move us in the direction that we're supposed to be going. So that would be my comments to that. And then Joe's here also if we wanted to.
Steve, I'd like to address one thing. Okay, and I'd like Joe to come up here and answer this question. Over a year ago, we asked you about the new accounting software. Okay, we asked you to start running it parallel with us last quarter last year. I have heard nothing of this software. We asked 3 years ago it's supposed to be coming online, so where is it?
They are still working through some bugs of getting it online. We have our first couple of communities up. Obviously, we don't want to bring nothing but the final product to Celebration because of these conversations that we're having now. So what the issue that has been, it's called VMS, is the system that you're referring to, Jack. It's been the integration between our accounts payable software and also the accounting part. So Concur is a system that we currently use. So Concur and VMS are working together to get that integration issue solved. And then by the end of the year, we should have a priority list of as far as how we're going to roll it out for the rest of our communities. But as of right now, we've only, got one on board, and we got the second one we're trying on board now. But we've had some real issues with the integration part.
I gotta say, Joe, that's not an acceptable answer. It really isn't.
Well, it's just the truth. I mean,
maybe
that's
the truth. Find some other accounting software. We have other management companies that have accounting software where the individual residents can go directly to their accounts, see what's going on. We have none of that.
Yeah, and we're striving. We want to get there, Jack. That's the system that we have in place, and that's what we're working on diligently every day. Okay. And then back to your comments. I think it's a great idea, and I think this ties right into your strategic planning, your sustainability study, and all of that. I completely support the idea about getting Susan or someone from the team out there twice a year, face to face, with set agendas. The accountant getting a board member out there once a year. And I even would think it would be wise to strategically plan out when we're going to get the GL and maybe our VP of Financial Services here to see the site as well, and to come to a meeting and go to these different things. So I support it 120%. I think it's a fantastic idea, and it will certainly improve those processes and set some expectations moving forward long term.
And to follow up on your comment, one more iteration, Jackson, I actually think some of the freeform stuff we've done, whether it's on a monthly basis for our financials or this, actually leads to some of the questions we're getting to, because that's actually how we found this one last week. It's not sitting there and I'm saying, Susan, why does this make sense? And she's going, well, it doesn't. And in a responsiveness from Arizona type thing, I've never seen a time yet when she goes to Arizona and they don't respond pretty
They
effectively.
always respond.
I don't think we've had a prioritization issue that I have seen. I mean, obviously.
Well, with all due respect, I've seen in the time in Artisan Park since Evergreen has come in, a continuing disagreement between CCMC and Evergreen in trying to get responsive documents back and forth. And I know that you've worked on this along with Susan. I don't think it's working properly or effectively yet. That's one example. I don't dig into these other things. I take your word for it if you say that we're getting responsiveness. But I would say that there is a long history in which CCMC has been not as forthcoming and progressive and working with us as I think you are today. But I would share Jack's concern that when we hear about, new upgrades to accounting, and I get that reality is reality, but, you're paid to get a result, and, it should just get done. It should be made to happen. And I think this is what frustrates people in the community sometimes, is that we have these flurries, and frankly, if it were not for your work, Brian, I think we would just continue rolling along. And that's probably not in our best interest. So we can improve this. We can make this better. I know that's why you're here today, Joe. I know that's what we're asking for. But I think we should continue to demand what the contract says, which is first-class service. That's your expectation, it's our expectation. Do I think we get first-class service from Arizona? No. Not across the board, not on all things. And I think we've just identified a couple of areas where we don't.
Well, I'm going to have to jump in on the artisan, because we are getting artisan everything they need when they need it. It's the other way. We're not getting the financials when they're due
We
back to
actually
us.
made a decision, like on the reserves, you'll notice on the reserve package for the service areas, we're always a month behind on artisan because Evergreen doesn't get us the information.
Right.
There's always two sides to the story.
There's three, actually.
Well, there could be three.
Somewhere in the middle is the word.
I don't,
Okay.
Evergreen is a complicated story and not one we have to solve today. I think the trip to Arizona would be great. I think we as a board have went in different directions than we've ever went before. I hope and pray that when you replace me as treasurer next year, if you do, that you think about the next treasurer being somebody who actually rolls forward with some of the stuff we've done. I think we've made a lot of constructive changes in the whole approach, and we should roll forward with them. And
Well, sustainability is key here, and that's why I want to refocus us on that. Because every year I have a new board, and it could be a new treasurer every year, and not every treasurer has the same methodology on how they want to do the budget. I've had 4 different methodologies in the 4 years that I've been here.
Not to beat a dead horse, do we have any kind of a deadline with this system? Just because I've been hearing about it for a very long time.
Hard deadline, no. I mean, we have to get it worked out correctly before we can actually
Would
say,
it
okay, when are
help-
the dates?
One thing that I've heard was because of the size of the celebration or the uniqueness, is there a way maybe service areas do a smaller, area to run parallel, so that way kinks are all over the entire community? I don't know.
I think he's saying they got kinks on a national basis. They're still working out, and they're not ready to test them on a service area here.
You don't have a deadline with that, because it's a partner, right? It's a separate company, a third-party
It's a separate company, right.
You don't have a deadline established with them?
I'd have to, I don't know,
Yeah.
Kevin, I'm not
No,
implementing
yeah,
VMS.
I'm just
I
curious,
mean,
because that.
Yeah, I could find out
think everyone
what
needs
their
deadlines.
term is as far as deliverables from VMS and Concur. If you want me to get me.
Yeah, just say, hey, I'm catching heat, can you?
Oh, they know we're catching
No.
heat.
And
They
I-
absolutely know it.
I don't want to deflect from the sense of
Yeah.
urgency of getting a new system, but the problems that we're seeing aren't because of our GenArc system, though. The problems that we're seeing, and that Brian and Susan are identifying to you today for this budget meeting, are problems of something is getting lost in translation because of the uniqueness of how Celebration operates. And I think that the solution here is to have these two sitting in front of Jen to show her, and then have Jen, which is our person, come out here and see it. And because not every community runs the same, not every community has a CJC, a CROA, Canoa, and a cost-sharing agreement.
I
Every
agree.
community has a different uniqueness.
Hard to imagine why.
I agree with you. I'm actually trying to fight for you guys as well, to have a tool and a resource that could help that communication.
Well, and I think Joe's right. We want it as soon as we can get it. And I'll be the first to volunteer. Let's take it on, let's do it. I have no problem with it, but we want one that works, that
But I
doesn't
mean,
have kinks in it.
Yeah, in all fairness, that GenArc system is how old now?
Maybe
GenArc is one of the well-established
Yeah, it's probably-
accounting systems for community association management, just like
I
the
know,
Parks and
but
Rec
we, I
system,
mean,
there's
we talked
multiple
about an update,
systems.
3 years ago, because it is so slow.
Okay.
It's,
Jenna
sorry.
will be
Yeah.
part of our trip to Arizona.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the current one or the new one?
It's 20.
GenArc
I
is
think we're talking about functionality though, and Jack's talking about like having the really nice stereo in your car
Well,
versus
technology
having.
is a cornerstone, and I think we should be able to have online
But I think
accounting.
to-
I don't think that's really that difficult.
I think,
I don't.
when we craft out like a set agenda for the trip, and I mean, that should be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Well, I would say implementing a accounting system nationwide is probably not as simple as.
No, but here's the difference though, and I'm gonna be very blunt with this. It's not our job, it's not your job. It's your corporate
Sure.
office's job to have that set up. And the request from this board is to please work on it and not have a 3-year and growing length to make that happen.
Kevin, I hear you
So
loud and clear.
that's-
I'm with you.
That's
If I may.
I'm being blunt, I know,
I'm
but
sure
I'm not
Mr. Jackson
caffeine.
would have a comment on this one too, but I've had a couple of global projects with a $10 million budget in 2 years that went 5 years and came in at $25 million. These things, any big organizations, and CCMC is a huge org, these things get complicated. You usually take the budget times 150 or 250% and take the timeline times 2.5, and then you pray.
Never happened.
You never had that happen to you?
I don't know. Town center's got to figure it out, and that's a surprise.
Is that you've got EMS and you're replacing, it sounds like the ledger accounting system, but you're not replacing the accounts payable.
We are all integrating. Mhm.
So what about this interface that you have with this other company?
Well, Concur is the accounts payable portion of that with VMS. So they,
It is part of VMS?
well, no, they're a separate company, but they integrate with VMS. So they talk to each other.
We've got two different vendors here.
Right.
And now, in the specifications and everything, it should have been written, so the interface was there, but you know,
Yeah.
accomplished. It scares me a little bit that you're still working on the interface at this stage, this far down the line, which is gonna be a 5-year project like Brian just described.
So do we need to formally make a motion to send Brian and Susan for this purpose?
I don't know if we need a motion. Do we have a sense that that's a good idea?
I think if you just say, go with God, we're gonna go with God.
We have a sense
As long
that that's a good
as
idea.
Brian's expenses aren't more than $5,000, I can authorize them to.
That's-
You better not be. And then with respect to the auditor, do you have a recommendation for us, Brian, as to the auditor contract? Or do you want to wait pending your trip to Arizona?
No, I don't think the trip to Arizona affects it at all. I think you have to do, if you were gonna replace your 2018 auditor at this late hour, I think it's God help you time. I really do.
Or go back to the auditor that you had
You either go
originally.
back to the auditor you had before and.
Did
what's
you have
your-
any interaction
And
with
what's
them?
your explanation gonna be? No, I haven't interacted with a new auditor. I had one, I think I had sent you all an email and said there might be wisdom in just having me meet with a new auditor and see if I can negotiate a deal one-on-one and then find out where they're at and what they're thinking and what I've learned. I think in the real world, that's what you would do. You would send the treasurer or the CFO and say, go talk to the auditor, see what you can figure out. I think we gotta pay what we gotta pay this year, and then I think we would be wise to put at least an additional $5,000 in next year's budget for audit fees. We wanna bid it out next year, we can bid it out, I don't care. But I think we gotta, it's October 1. I mean, we gotta get through this year's audit, and if we're out there bidding it out at the end of the fourth quarter, we'll be what's known as a prisoner to any quote we can get.
So what's the board item on Wednesday that has to do with our auditor?
It is to approve the $17,500 fee for the audit for 2018.
For 2018?
No, for 2019.
2018.
Oh, that's just
2018. We're talking
right.
this year.
17.
It's not even next
That's
year?
what I'm saying.
Well, they'll do
We're
it
talking
next
this
year, but it's this year's audit.
Oh, yeah, so it is, isn't it a 2019 expense to audit your 2018 financials? And I think that if that's the,
2019 expense.
yes.
Well, no, you gotta accrue it.
We
You
accrue
approve
it
this year,
over
but
the
it's-
year.
I understand, but we have the budget for it though, right? And if we only have
Well, no,
10,000 in the
okay,
budget.
Okay, the 17,500 that they're asking for this year would be accrued as a 2018 expense, and then I'm saying, let's put 15,000 in the budget for next year, we can think about bidding it out. But I think, I'll talk to them, see if I can get them down to 15, learn what I can learn, I'll report back to the group. So we've got this year and the accrual of whatever we're gonna have to book as one item, and then with next year for budgeting, I think we should at least, I think it was in here for 10 or 10.5, I think we should at least get that to
We
15.
should
And then I
bid-
need
we
one
should
more,
bid that out.
and then I need one more direction from you though too. So add another 5 into that expense line, but then I need to reduce this by another 5, right? That capital improvement, because it needs to balance.
It'll need to balance.
So I need to balance it.
Can
from that.
people agree
For
that we need to put a little
2019.
more in the budget for next year?
I second your motion as amended by Steve.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're okay with that?
you got that, Rachel?
I do, I can.
Perfect.
So that's that adjustment for next year. The budget item for this year is the 2018 audit,
Right,
which is
just-
more than our
Which is more
allocated
than we
budget
had
amount.
budgeted and is just going to be reality.
And more than they bid.
Yeah, but a bid,
That's why we need to rebid it.
Absolutely.
Rebid it next year?
Yeah,
Fine,
rebid it next year.
I'm perfectly happy with that. They'll probably be happy too. But then let's finish this year with a strong set of financials with the trip. Okay, so I'll take any other questions, but I believe with this one adjustment of the $5,000, which will reduce to 119 to 114, I'm happy with this budget.
Not really a question, but so much as a comment. I'd like to see us go ahead and formalize the idea of a 2-year rolling budget. I think you've given ample reasons why we need to be looking at a longer time horizon than we're doing it a year to year. And I think Steve's comment just now about having to deal with a different board every year probably fits into that narrative as well. While we're not locking in the next board to the budget, at least there is a framework. And that framework would be better than what we had when we arrived 6 months ago.
Okay, so then what I would like to see us do for October, and Steve and I, assuming you guys all say you're happy today, Steve and I need to work on an agenda for the October meeting, because at the October meeting, I would plan on taking pretty much the package here and saying this is our financials. If we give me the charge coming out of the October meeting to go to a 2-year budget, I'll agree to have one done by March 1st or something, so that, you know, when the new board comes in and new officers are positioned, we've already got a 2-year rolling in place that this group could look at.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense if you tie it into this strategic process also as that part of that step forward. It's 2 years out, and then that way you're putting in all your steps and all your systems versus. I spoke with Nicole Engelman, who's our.
Can we wait on that to finish these other thoughts?
Oh, okay.
That's a whole
just tied
different,
directly
that's
to
a whole
this,
different
so.
direction. A 2-year rolling budget, if you were to commit to do that by March 1st, does that mean the 2020 budget then? So you would have
It'll be
19?
a 19 and 20
So
budget.
19
the
would-
19 budget will be adopted by the board in October at the board meeting.
Right.
Building the 2020 budget, we've never had a requirement that it go to the community or anything. I would build it. I mean, we're gonna build it. It's gonna be very easy to
Right,
build out
right.
this. We build something, we review it, whether the board, how the board chooses to adopt it, or whether they want the new board to adopt it in March or April, we can all discuss.
But here's where it does tie though, because you're gonna do a community survey, you're gonna do a sustainability study, you're gonna do a new master plan. Those 3 things may change what your 2020 budget looks like. So you almost have to kind of get in the mind frame of this before you start doing your 2-year budget.
So as part of that, and going to Jackson's point, and then it goes to the idea of having this documentation clear. You've also, and we agreed to a week ago, things like the 2% increase. So there's some elements that I think should be codified, like in the comments, or that are very, very clear to the future boards. The 500,000 contingency.
Get rid of the surplus into work moving.
Yeah,
to
and
working
so
capital.
whatever those key principles are, I think should just be,
I think there needs to be a page or a page and a half
that are
codified.
really embedded there.
Kevin, you had a comment, or?
No, I'm looking at something else, another question that I just saw something.
So
Get
we
there later.
need to get some closure if we need motions or
Okay,
whatever.
so before anything else on the budget at all? Any questions at all?
I'll
CGC
recap.
question?
So my direction, the only thing
Yeah.
I'm doing differently here is that I'm adding 5,000 to audit and reducing 5,000 from that capital improvement contribution.
Kevin, you?
So before we go to another topic, let's close out. We're clear that going to Arizona with Susan would be something that we want.
I think.
And we would pay for
Makes sense.
your going to Arizona.
And that'll be in
Not to
18
exceed
expense.
5,000.
We'll do it probably November, right?
Okay, so sometime in a timely way, report coming back. Do we need a discussion on what we need to know, or you know best? I mean,
It'll be my responsibility to come back to the board with an agenda, and I'll work with Susan and
Okay.
Steve on
Okay.
that.
Good. So we're at closure on that. And the 2-year rolling, we're at closure on.
And I will speak to the auditor about 2018, learn more, at a minimum say, they're not gonna move on to 2017-5, or maybe they will, I don't know, and I'll come back to the board with a report. I'm gonna
Right.
do that.
And then
I
it's
do
our
I do
intent.
have one budget question, one more. On the events, where we talked about the increase of 35,000, JR's here. Could you come up for 1 second? Good morning. Does that increase of the 35,000, now having had the events committee meeting post our board meeting, is that number sufficient? Does it satisfy the needs? Do we have an agreement on that committee that this is a workable number to do the events that we want to do in town?
I believe so, yes. The increase allows us not having to cut back or not having to scale back some events to do another event, puts it at the level that what the community would expect.
And it was approved by the special events.
But the other piece of that we talked about in budget was, and we have the capability without overload for staff.
Well, there's always overload when it comes to events. I mean, we do a lot. We're expanding our event footprint a little bit.
Okay.
Some of them aren't major, but we're going to do some more different things.
Okay.
But I mean, we take that into account as we plan the calendar too.
Okay.
And I did sit in on that meeting that was right afterwards, and they worked on it. They did work on it, figuring out what the real number would be for each thing. One thing, my input at that meeting, and I did mention this in the email, was to potentially those larger events, such as this year we have the holiday concert. I looked at that as a very expensive event. It is. I don't think any of us would question that. I mean, Celebration is definitely a charitable community. However, it turns into a lot of money that's getting donated continually out. So one of my suggestions was, and if they take it, awesome. If not, whatever. Maybe do the charitable auction with a 50-50 or separate things like that, but make some of these events revenue generating, so that way money can go back into their budget for the following year and continually grow to make the events stronger, more impressive.
After the meeting, when I met with Steve to give him the new numbers, I did increase revenue numbers
Awesome.
that would come back to the association.
I think it's only fair. I want to give away as much as we can, but there comes a point that it's just not possible.
I like that idea a lot.
So that was a thought.
Good.
So we'll see.
Thanks for your work on this.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I know you have a busy fall ahead.
Okay.
We're in it.
So I just asked Steve, I wasn't aware of this. They would like to get the budget out to the community by the end of next week.
It gives the month of October for the community to look at it and then be aware of the meeting where you're going to vote and approve it.
So do we need an action item for Wednesday night?
No, and I just need consensus today that this is the budget, because we can't change it between now and next week, though.
But you put it in more of a narrative form.
It's a narrative
It's
letter.
not-
It's not this intensive, no.
It's like-
It'll be a high overview with the narrative included.
And so
And then,
this went up
Yep.
because such and, I mean, this is
Yeah.
what Gary was talking about earlier. This
what I
went
would
up,
like
this
to
went
do,
down.
though, is make sure Brian puts a set of eyes on the narrative, too, before it goes out, just to verify that it's all okay.
We will send it to the board, though. If we said we were gonna try to mail it next Friday, when it comes to the board, you're gonna need to read it. I mean, you're gonna need to prioritize it, and we'll figure out exactly what that is.
Yeah, just give us a timeline on that. Okay.
Yeah, let's try for not Friday afternoon at 4:30, please.
3 o'clock at the latest, no, noon.
That's always the goal. I hate to do something on Friday at 4:30.
I
It
think
happens,
everything else
so-
should be turned off Friday at noon.
So we're basically done at the high level, but there was something where I cut you off.
Yeah, to put my damn CJC 1/3, 1/4, that whole situation to bed. So the difference, I believe, Steve, you mentioned, short story, the CJC contribution used to be 1/3 as opposed to 1/4. And I found that it changed, couldn't find any documents online to show when that happens. And ultimately, the answer that I'm understanding is that because apartments such as Sienna, Town Center,
Georgetown.
Mirasol, Georgetown,
There are a few.
those were apartments they converted into residential, so they went to CROA. Now, my question is, at that time, how much of the boulevard was built up? How did it get figured? Is it unit size? Is it square footage size? So my question is that CJC expense, are we looking actually almost the other way now? Meaning, how did that difference change? Was it by unit, by square footage, by parcel?
It's square footage. So Canoa's assessments are based off of square footage. They
For the
pay-
CJC contribution?
Or acreage, I'm sorry, not square footage. They pay they have an expense line, just like CROA has an expense line to go towards CJC that drives their ultimate assessment per acre. So they pay right now $1,187
per acre.
per
And their reason
acre.
for changing, which that's a very small amount, so that's not helping the case. But their reason for changing was that they're losing on that $1,000 per acre. The size of acreage that they lost compared to that percentage is a big difference, I think. I don't know, just off the top of my head. Regardless, moving forward at 2018, is that the fair allotment?
I mean, for the sake of the audience, we distributed the original contract, the amendment to the contract and everything, so everything could be seen. I had a couple of thoughts as I reread everything yesterday. Island Village is coming online.
Yes.
They're gonna wanna revisit then. We've now went to the magazine, which basically we've got it down to where CJC is CCMC type expenses for certain employees and stuff like that. As Steve has told us, he thinks we're winning on the allocation, because if we're gonna, when we open one door, we're gonna open every door. And I think we're gonna have to open every door when Island Village comes online, so.
Well, I believe fair is fair, but I think if EJC wants to open the door when Island Village is online, they stay very quiet during the time of expansion under commercial.
And then I think we fight like banshees.
I think your opportunity to solve your problem that you've defined in the past is to look at what it looks like to ultimately dissolve the joint committee, but still be able to keep some sort of cost sharing to where you're not taking the brunt of taking on all those expenses.
Well, the community was founded without a CJC, and CJC only came on board after the transfer of CROA.
Two different things, though.
CCC.
The joint committee as an umbrella that is ratifying all your expenditures versus the cost-sharing agreement. And I think we have to determine which one of those are the real issues that we want to address. And it sounds like from the way you all have identified the problems that you see in this community, it looks more on the umbrella of CJC being the ratification body, not necessarily the expenditures. Now, we could spend a lot of time opening every door, but I'm telling you, you're going to end up paying more money as CROA, as an association entity.
And that is something we mentioned in 2019 we're going to be looking through. As long as we continue looking through that, then I will keep my mouth shut this year. But next year's budget, I'm going to be loud with this one.
Well, and I would only add that in my weekend reading was going back through all the contracts with the CCMC and the charter. And it's interesting to me that the ultimate authority for everything is the president of the CJC, for everything. If there is any dispute between CROA and CANOA, if there's any dispute related to management, if there is any dispute over the charter, it all is built on the CJC president, which by definition will be an employee of the Celebration Company for the foreseeable future. So when we get to that debate in 2019, I think the debate needs to be clearly established that what we've done is that we've conceded the ultimate control, if not the day-to-day control, we've conceded the ultimate control back to Disney again for those things that may be really vital to us. And it may come to fruition over Island Village. And there may be a number of things around Island Village in which our interests and CANOA's and the Celebration Companies are adverse.
And in 2019, you'll be dealing with the budget year 2020.
Yeah.
And that's when Island Village comes online. So there's a good reason to open all these, but you're 100% correct. You got 3
They have final
TCC
say.
and 2 guinea pigs, and they win every vote.
Right, and I think the question comes to play, at what point is TCC sold at their 90%? I think Island Village gets them very close to that,
They
other
can keep
than the
finding
property
lands.
that they own on the other side of I-4, and then the determination is what do they want to do with that? So it may be a meaningful conversation with them to say, well, how long are we planning on running the CJC the way
I
it
just
is?
look at things been very muddy, you know, CANOA and CROA, same attorneys, same management companies, same, you know, they hide in the background, but they still make the final say and the final decision. That's not a question. That's who CCMC's contract is with CJC. You know, it's, we're faces here, and I'm not about to get my face
signature though on
changed.
that contract.
It just indicates.
This is
Also
the
the
first
art.
time you've changed that, because it used to be just CJC, but now it's all 3 entities.
Yeah.
Also
So
the art.
I think it's worth noting,
So
but thank you.
might that be some part of our
That is part
charter
of that
change
conversation.
review process?
It's on your book already, isn't it, Susan?
Yes.
Okay.
It's already there. Good.
The book is filled out.
It's getting big, yeah, that's why that.
Other budget items, questions?
Final item was the water tower up at Water Tower Place, that structure. That is 75% paid for by CROA. I think that's silly. That's, for a committee, I don't know of any other committee that owns property. CJC owns that land. Dog Park doesn't own their land. CROA owns it. So why does CROA pay 75% for land that is CJC that's not a residential use? And as a follow-up question, the banners that go onto that water tower, who pays for those banners?
I'll answer your first question first. The joint committee cannot be compared to the dog park committee. Dog park committee is a committee that you all appoint to delegate some of your duties and responsibilities to have them assist. The joint committee is a governing document, umbrella, cost sharing, and they do have one amenity, one entity that they own, and that's the water tower. And the governing documents drive how those, how the expenditures are split in the 75-25%. Second question, who pays for the banners? I believe we have some banners that we've purchased ourselves, and then are there other entities that have banners that they pay for that they post?
We pay for the farmer's market and the Posh Puchin and anything else that goes up, we pay for.
It
CROA
would be
pays
another
for,
entity's
CJC
banner.
pays for.
Well,
The farmer's
Pooch, I
market
believe,
is
was a
CJC event,
CCS expense,
so
and then the farmer's market probably would have been a CROA expenditure for that one.
I know it's so little, but it's the principle of whose tower is that and who's paying for it.
It's
I
the
just-
joint
I don't know,
committee's tower.
I think in the divorce with CROA and Kanoa, they can have a water tower. That's it.
Or in the relationship of building together, we share the children
I can
properly.
think of some other things
Yeah.
to them as well.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, any last questions, or do we have a budget?
Any other questions?
Why are you looking at me?
Any other questions? Jack, anything?
I'm good.
Good, done a good job.
I'm
That's
good.
fine.
I'm good.
Thank you, Brian,
Brian,
Susan,
yeah.
and Steve.
And Brian has been wonderful working with on this. This has been a very smooth year for doing the budget, and Brian gets a lot of credit for that. He's done a great job with this.
Thank you. We will get a package to you early next week, fair? That give us
I
a
think
week?
that's fair.
Early next week, we'll get a package to you that will be the one that would be delivered to the public. We ask you to please prioritize your review of that.
If that goes out Friday to the public,
Friday,
can we
Friday
have
next
it,
week there?
Next Friday, I think, would be.
can we
fair.
have it Tuesday, Wednesday, to give everybody
I
48
think we're
hours
saying
to,
Monday next week. right?
Monday's our
Okay.
workshop.
Monday?
Monday's a workshop.
and we'll have it by Monday?
Monday's a workshop.
We'll,
October
we'll
1.
strive to have it to you in advance of the workshop.
Just 48 hours.
It may be in your
Digest it.
inbox, but that,
It's not a big deal, it's what we already know, but.
We have a 2.5-hour workshop on Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, I expect Monday,
No, it's a Monday workshop.
It's
Or you want
listed
you
as
want Tuesday
Monday.
workshop, NONC?
Well, let me ask the question. Eileen Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. I'm on the dog committee, and the dog committee is coming up in October to discuss at a workshop. But we would like to know if you have any idea at this point which workshop it's going to be.
Monday, October
Okay,
1st.
I think we need to tell the dog committee.
It's listed, the draft
'Cause we thought it
agenda
was gonna be
says
the
Dog
15th.
Park Committee draft rules and procedures,
I
20
think what
minutes.
she's saying is we haven't told them.
We actually thought it was going to be the 15th, because we thought this.
Would you prefer it be the 15th?
Would you rather do the 15th?
I'm not, I'm just a member of the committee, and I think somebody
The
needs to
important thing for
maybe-
that discussion is that it become a board item by that board meeting, and in order to have it for the October board meeting, the 15th is too late.
Okay.
And the dog park is already giving you their recommendation.
No, we have not seen, I
Haven't
have
seen
not.
them.
Has anyone seen dog park recommendations?
Recommendation for what?
So then why we can talk offline.
We need to
then,
get
because
the packet from the dog
It
park.
doesn't make sense to do it next Monday then if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
No, it does make sense, so we have the,
I'm just throwing that out there.
today is Monday, we have a few days to review.
Well, is the dog park committee done with it?
I believe they are. I mean, I would suggest you get in touch with Maureen and make sure that she can
She
make the
presented at the
first.
board meeting
Yeah,
a
as
week,
far as
a month ago.
we are working on it,
And
actually.
she was
at the
hoping to be
moment.
on the September agenda. I said it has to be workshopped before we agenda it.
When's your next meeting?
Not till, I think, the 13th.
So we need their packet.
or
The
the-
13th?
It's,
I'll make
it was
sure
in
you get it.
preparation for the meeting for the 15th.
Okay, so it
but
makes sense
we
to.
aren't discussing it.
I'll make sure
we
you
need to
get
get
it.
in touch
Thank
with the
you.
chair.
I thought the agenda for the first was very full.
It's very,
Was the first one?
I thought the October 1st agenda you drafted was very full. It took me longer to read that than it did to read the entire budget.
Can I add, since I sent an email, and I want to just briefly clarify if we're talking about the
Yeah.
October 1st. Over the last 2 weeks or so, or actually since the town hall meeting, there has been continuing conversation among the condos trying to get a response from Comcast. They have been met with varying degrees of difficulty, bordering on no response at all. Over the weekend, several condo association presidents reached out to me personally and said, this is an intolerable situation and we need to make some decisions, and they asked that we convene a meeting of the condo board managers, reps, whatever, hopefully this week, so that they could talk to one another, because apparently they're being offered different deals and they want to do that. As a point of information, I have forwarded an email to Steve asking him to set up a meeting, hopefully on Thursday or Friday of this week, for those folks to meet. I am glad to attend as the liaison of the board to listen and report back to you. I don't know that the board or any of us have any ability to do anything about this, very candidly. But I think we need to at least try to facilitate and help them move forward. So that's where we stand. And that's why I asked it to be put on the October 1st meeting, so that I can at least report back.
So we'll have a report back. Hopefully we'll have a meeting Thursday or Friday of this week.
That's the hope.
And all of us would be invited?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So depending on when, yeah.
I mean, I've heard of residents who've called Comcast trying to get the fiber extended to their house, and they've had people on the phone say, we don't know what you're talking about. So, I mean, Comcast makes darn near anybody look good.
Yeah.
The only thing I would challenge on is, do you want to make it a board meeting where they're coming, or, because if your entire board's showing up?
We should have no more than 3 board members there.
And if there are more than 3, I'll be glad to leave.
No.
Once you get it set up,
I will inform the board.
What's the difference
You
between
can inform
posting
the
the
board
meeting
and we can-
publicly or just whoever?
whomever's available can come, up to 3.
Up to 3. If
And we
once the meeting is set, just tell the board members when it's going to be, and if somebody wants to go, respond to everybody so that we
Yeah,
then know.
so
it's
we
no
can
more than
weigh in
3.
and then respectfully, I mean, I'll go
Okay.
if I'm, depending on when.
and Jackson, since I know you'll be there, will you add the issues homeowners are having? Because homeowners that have never had cable laid are having pushback getting in.
I will, but
I mean, just, it
It's
doesn't do any
this is
good to
more-
throw it on there.
these are the condos, and they're faced with a very different problem right now.
Yeah.
And they're under a time crunch. so-
Homeowners have a customer account representative that they can come see, that is here on
Comes here
site
to-
once a
Right,
month,
it's
and there's a
different.
dedicated phone number that they can call
Yeah.
That's a
for
good idea.
celebration.
Yeah.
So just, thank you for bringing that. I'll add that to the agenda as a quick update, another quick update. Can we take off the budget updates? Can I verify that that's all?
We don't need that.
Okay, because I think we're done. And there will be, there's 3 reading assignments, 2 of which we already have. One is dumpsters, one is the management consultant proposal, and then the third is the dog park materials that we have not yet received.
Sounds like that might get pushed.
Then it can't be voted on in October, and they were anxious to move it.
Why can't it be voted
Can
on
still
in
be.
October?
Because we have to have the board packet, doesn't the board packet go out?
Yes, but we can always pull the action item if there are
We don't know what the
changes.
action items are yet. But we have to
If they
rebuild
review
that
it on the
agenda.
15th, that we can still get it in the board packet for them to approve.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put is that right, Rachel? The dog park, if they workshopped it on the 15th rather than on the 1st, let me look at our calendar, because
You would-
our meeting is gonna be on 1, 2, 3, 4, the
9 days
24th,
later. 9 days later.
which means we would,
It can go out as one of favorites, not so favorite things, which is a
Yeah.
right, the week of the
Needs to be
15th is the week we
publicly
put.
displayed.
We have a,
Well, why don't you put the original, what you have now, in the board packet, and then we can state on there
We
that
don't
there's
have
a.
anything yet.
But we will, by the 15th, you will have it in your hands, we can put that in the board packet, and we can say at the workshop on the 15th, we'll be discussing
And why
it.
not have it on the 1st?
We can make it work.
They don't have
That's-
it.
But we can have that, if it's done, we can have it today.
But is it done?
Is it done?
It sounds like it's not done.
I've got an email going.
They don't know if it's done. I would prefer.
I understand that it's done. And it's been done for a couple of weeks.
Well, Eileen's saying, yes, it's done.
That was my understanding, that it's been done for a little while, we just didn't.
Who's
do
on
a
first?
workshop for
We need to have a workshop. Have it workshopped.
It can go on the 1st or the 15th, and I can get it on the agenda for October 24th.
So I guess the question isn't whether it's done now. The question is it too much to have on your October 1 agenda? Do you need to push it to the 15th because of how full your agenda is? If you want to do it on the 1st, we'll have it to you this week.
I'm happy waiting till the
15th is-
15th.
first, because it may really need to be on 15th as well.
Yeah, it may need both.
Really?
It may need both. Just depending, because
What are we
Knows
asking
something?
for?
Who knows what?
new rules and regulations, signage, and key card access, and penalties for those who are in violation, which is withdrawal of dog park privileges.
David, have you seen it?
No. I just know about it.
It's what you asked them to do, though. It's what you tasked them to do. So they're bringing it back then and saying, here, we want you to review it. We
Fine,
want you
throw it
to-"
on the 1st, and if we have time for it, and we can make it work, then yeah, let's do it.
Fine with me.
Okay? So we'll have that on the 1st and see if we need it on the 15th. Okay, anything else for today?
Yes, I would like to ask,
Yes.
and I know
I cut you
you
off
all
here
might want
half hour
to
ago.
discuss this further, but if we want to bring Nicole in to help meet step 2, Nicole's our Vice President of Communications. She's the one that can do a review of this community-wide survey in the database. We're looking at November 5th, and I want to make sure that that's a workshop day for you. I want to make sure that workshop day works.
What would we do with her exactly?
She would go over the CCMC community-wide survey, the database, and then how it works with benchmarking against other communities, and talk
You know,
to
it's
them
soft stuff,
about this overall project.
Which is harder stuff.
It's touchy-feely.
Which is harder
It's
stuff.
emotion. It's narrative.
It's
not
part of the
numbers.
strategic process that you all just agreed upon at the September 10th meeting.
Is she already out here, or is she making a special flight?
CCMC would be bringing her in.
Or do we need her face-to-face?
Then I think it's a mistake to bring her in unless we're going to dedicate a workshop. What you could do is when Susan and I are out there, is we can add that to the agenda, sit with her, and then have a follow-up presentation with her here. Conceptually, we already agree.
She's communication.
Communications.
Does she, Joe, has she ever done like virtual conferences? Well,
Like
face-to-face
a
is
Sky-
great.
like a Skype or a-
Yeah,
Go to meeting.
yeah. Can we throw something on a screen and kind of embrace our technology side? And just save everybody some money and time and.
It's a big investment of time.
It wouldn't.
Let's be clear, I mean, her time will be on us.
No, I understand that. No, but it's still somebody's
If you
time.
can get better use face-to-face.
Well, my fear is David loves to have agendas that are this long, and we end up doing a lot of
I
10-minute.
don't build these.
We have a lot of 10-minute items. I don't want to fly someone out here for 10 or 12 minutes.
Right, absolutely.
We either dedicate
Yeah.
we either dedicate a workshop to her and the whole conceptual process, and I don't think we're going to be ready on November 5th for
So
that.
that's why
We can
saying,
push
do we
it to
do-
December if we want to look at it.
But do we do a virtual touch kind of a thing and kind of hear what she has to say briefly, and then we can determine?
I'm fine.
Well,
Is it worth it
I'm
for
fine
her
with
to
that.
fly
I mean,
all the
a
way out
virtual
here?
touch, I'm old
Fine.
school. I'd rather have the personal touch. But, you know, I think December makes more sense, and I think it should be a dedicated event just for that purpose.
If we bring her out, then a workshop is dedicated to budgeting, the strategic process, and go into a 2-year cycle.
Good.
That's it.
Then we dedicate an entire workshop to
Yeah, exactly.
that.
Exactly. And that seems like it would be a good congregation of all of those ideas at once.
Well, it'd be after we've adopted ours, after the trip
Yeah.
we've made out there and everything. The timing would be right, plus coming out of that, we'd roll forward with the stuff for the March 1st deadline we talked about on the other. Is that fair, Susan?
So, yeah, right now we have December 3rd and 17th as draft workshop dates. For December.
Find
That
out which
makes
one
more
of those
sense.
two might work best for her. and
Got it.
If Joe can be available, that's probably smart, and
Okay. Great.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, we're all set?
Yo.
Move to adjourn?
10:30 yet?
It's 10:30. Thank you. Thank you all. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank
No,
you.
no, you still got 2 hours to make up from last week.
Painful, but it's done.
Less painful than normal, though. So it's all relative of the pain level.
Your point was very good. Well, no, I understood. I couldn't figure out, and then